You have to say, look, I really want to do that or I don't. And some folks want to and some folks don't. If you're going to do it, I really think you have to have belief in the fact that you can trust in others, number one, but also know that you can guide them on the journey and you feel like you have a process.
The Industrial Growth Institute podcast connects you with the big thinkers, makers, and subject matter experts across all aspects of an integrated B2B industrial revenue growth function. From strategy, board oversight and transactions, through all the phases of manufacturing marketing, the complexities of industrial sales, and the nuances of marketing and sales technology and customer experience, I speak with guests who bring insights, innovative perspectives, best practices, and twists on traditional approaches. Each episode explores high-level thinking and in-the-weeds actionable tactics. If you enjoyed these discussions, then please help me out by liking and sharing the podcast, and especially by leaving a comment and giving a review. So with no further ado, let's jump into this episode. Hello, I'm Ed Marsh, host of the Industrial Growth Institute podcast. My goal in each episode of this podcast is to entertain, to help you get to know a particularly insightful person, and to provide high-level and tactical insights into one of many, many, many aspects of revenue growth. If you enjoy these conversations, please take a moment, indicate that, a quick like, share, comment, or review on your favorite platform means a lot. Today, we're going to talk hockey, sales management, and the potential impact that NCAA athletes can have on your sales organization. Joining me is an expert in all of these topics, a gentleman named Mario Trafficante. Mario brings over 20 plus years of business technology, IT, and sales experience. He specializes in technology optimization and has a focus on security risk, program management, and managed services, as well as AI, cloud, and customer experience. He's what he calls a traditional technology professional with experience across all facets of IT inside enterprise businesses. Prior to joining his current company, which is a company called Amplex, he was a partner in a firm called Blue Front Technology Group, which actually merged with a couple others in 2022 and then was subsequently purchased by a private equity firm called Gemspring Capital. It's out of Connecticut. Earlier in his career, he was responsible for managing a $40 million sales distribution channel for a large multinational carrier and data center provider. He holds a BA in Business Administration from Stonehill College in Easton, Mass., as well as an MBA in Finance from Bentley University in Waltham. And he's a college athlete. And he's a first-generation American of Italian immigrant parents. He's got a lot to tell us, and it's going to be a fascinating story. So this isn't going to be a Spitting Chicklets episode for those that, follow hockey. But we do take our hockey pretty seriously around Boston. I'm sure we're going to get into that as we talk. So welcome, Mario.
Hey, thank you so much. Pleasure to be here. Looking forward to the conversation on all those things. Really, really looking forward to it. So appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. So first, I'm going to take the bait. Traditional technology professional. That sounds like corporate speak. Tell me, what does that mean?
Yeah. So I mean, it certainly is a little bit of that in there. But I mean, what that means is I'd say over the bulk of my career, which, again, has spanned about 20 years, I spent a lot of time really trying to help businesses and senior level management at the enterprise level, at the mid-enterprise level, design, deploy, and manage IT infrastructure, and really help them get the most out of what it is they're trying to accomplish, from a business perspective, and making sure that we're matching the right technology to the right business need. So from a technology perspective, I think that's what we try to do in every engagement with all of our customers. So, I like to say we're Deloitte without the price tag and a heck of a lot more on the implementation side, because we're not just here to sort of spoon feed you a plan or try to tell you, look, this is what we think you should do, and here are a few vendors. Good luck. Let us know how it goes.
You mean sales isn't about telling?
It's actually not surprising. So no, and really throughout my career, we're really focused on guiding you through that journey and holding your hand and making sure that, we're being impactful along every step of the way.
All right. So with that out of the way, obviously we've heard your bio, impressive bio, but kind of give us the brief Mario Trafficante autobiography. Who are you? What makes you tick?
Yeah. I mean, at my core, I'm a very simple, straight shooting kind of guy. I mean, honestly, that's the best way to describe me. first generation, as you mentioned, first person in my family to graduate from college, first one to get an MBA. So, checked a lot of boxes that had never been done. And, for me, I think what motivates me and what's always motivated me is to try to really be better in every aspect of everything I do every day. So every day when I get up, I try to really get up and say, okay, look, these are the things that I really want to accomplish today. How am I going to accomplish them? What's the best pathway to get there in the most efficient manner? And how can I be the most impactful with the limited amount of time that we have in our day? Because that's the
Right.
most valuable asset that we have. And I really think that's me. And then just that drive and that constant desire to be better and and constantly learn and really take that knowledge and help my customers, help people be better, help be mentors to younger folks in terms of, well, how do I be a better salesperson? How do I be a better leader? How do I be
Right.
a more strategic person every day? So I think that's
Uh,
me, and that's who I try to be.
a lot of people tell a story like that about how I get up and
Sure.
every day, I'm going to be my best. But it sounds to me, every time I've talked to you, you sound genuine. It sounds to me like you do get out of bed and you do think that to yourself. Do you have a routine that takes you through that?
I do. Yeah, I do. I mean, a lot of my routine is typically getting up. I typically get up, relatively early in the morning, 5, 6 a.m. Try to get some form of exercise in and out of the way early on in the morning as best as I can, because that's usually before my kids wake up and the day starts to get crazy.
Right.
Get them, try to do a little bit of family stuff in the morning, carve out some time and make sure I'm there and present for the family and get them out the door and make sure the kids are in good shape and my wife needs whatever she needs. And then from there it's I flip the switch, man, and I'm on. And it's all about how am I trying to, I mean, for me right now, drive revenue. I mean, that's my in its simplistic terms. I get up every day. I'm like, what am I going to do today to be able to drive the most revenue for my firm and for my business unit at that point in time.
And
So,
then how do you
and
close the loop on that at the end of the day?
well, I mean, how I close the loop on that at the end of the day is I typically start with a group of tasks. And if I've accomplished those tasks and I've prioritized those tasks, which I typically do on a daily basis, then what's left over, which we try to make it zero, doesn't always work out that way, but we like to have a clean slate. Um, I think from there is then and then it's really try to keep that process and be consistent day after day and really put
Right.
that constant effort forward.
Yeah, consistency. I think that's definitely something we're going to dig into more here. First, let's take a quick detour into hockey.
Mhm.
It seems like from my research, I think you play defense. Is that correct?
That is correct. I played
All right.
defense. Yeah, I was lucky enough to play at St. John's Prep in high school, which for all of our North Shore Massachusetts fans, people would know. And then I was lucky enough to also play at Stonehill College, very much prior to them becoming the D1 program that they are today. So that was I was there years ago. I'm dating myself, but tremendous experience. Wouldn't trade it for the world. Made a tremendous amount of relationships with folks that I still talk to this day. And, a lot of things that, you and I have touched on in the past, just around the great skill set that translates from not just hockey, but any sport and any
Sure.
team sport into a sales role, into, running your own business unit, which is what, I try to empower all the folks that work with me and the people that I've, come across with in my career is you really are running your own business unit. And it's kind of like doing your job during a game. Right.
Yeah, and
There's a lot that translates between those two aspects.
for sure that we're going to unpack a lot of that. First, I want to kind of jump into this question about hockey defense. I'm not a student of the game in any sense of the word, but
Sure.
my sense as a casual fan is that a defenseman in hockey is a really unique mindset because you're switching back and forth. You call defense, but you're on offense a good portion of the time, and you've got to have a completely fluid mindset. And I think a lot about being on a sales call and a conversation
Mhm.
with a prospect. And it feels to
Yeah.
me like an analog. Am I just imagining that, or is there something there?
I mean, listen, there were offensive defensemen, there were defensive defensemen. I was definitely a defensive defenseman. I was not the most gifted offensive player out there, but I understood the game and I understood, you know, really both sides of the game, and that was really, I think, important. Playing defense was
Hmm.
understanding the offensive side, right? You hear that a lot in football, where they'll say, good defensive coordinators are guys that really understood the offensive side, have coached on both sides of the ball because they
Right.
understand the intricacies. And I think that's true, from a defensive perspective, right? But trust me, I had a lot of friends that played wing and forward, and they could barely sniff the defensive zone. So, um, there's definitely more of a two-way mindset in a defenseman, for sure. For
Right.
sure.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think that's a really important skill. And whether it translates directly, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm trying to tease
Mhm.
too much out of it. But for a salesperson, you have to be able to understand the buyer's perspective. You have to be empathetic. You have to understand your teammates. If you're doing team selling, if you got top to top, you have to be able to coach and
Yeah.
coordinate your CEO who you're trying to have reach out to the CEO of the prospect. You have to have those,
Hmm.
be able to shift between perspectives like that.
Hmm. I couldn't agree more. I mean, and specifically in sales, I mean, empathy is a huge piece of what we do. Is knowing that the person across the table from you is a human being that has challenges and problems and things they're trying to solve for, and bosses and budgets and everything that we all have in our
Right.
daily lives, and understanding how you can make them more successful, and less about how you can, I mean, at least for me, or what I try to emphasize is less about personal accolades, and more about how you can make that person on the other side of the table successful internally,
Right.
because if they're successful, and they and they get that acknowledgement internally, to me that's worth more than you saying, yeah, it was Mario that helped me with that solution, or it was
Well, plus, in
Joe
their
or
next job, they're
Susie.
going to call you again.
Correct. And that's the way I built my business over the years. And that's how we were able to be super successful building, Bluefront, prior to its acquisition, is really that repeat business. So much
Right.
of what we did was being able to foster those relationships, and then say, well, people have moved on. Well, where are they going? And they
Right.
always took us with them. And that was, a huge component of what we did and what we still do. But yeah, no.
Got it. So I'm guessing you didn't just come off the ice one day and suddenly decide, light bulb comes on, I'm going into sales. Tell me what brought you
Oh,
from
man.
college, whatever you were studying, into sales.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a funny journey. So I got out of college and was ready to spend a life in corporate finance, until I realized that, and forgive me for anybody that I'm going to offend by saying this, that corporate finance was a little too boring for me. It wasn't, there wasn't enough there for me. I really wasn't the type of personality that I thought could really stay sort of, at a desk all day long, crunching numbers, doing things along those lines. Not that I wasn't
Hmm.
good at it or anything else, but so I think that journey really helped me get to sales. And ironically, it was through a software company, that sort of brought my love of technology and my, knowledge of finance kind of together on a crash course, and was really sort of the division of my career where I said, you know what, I think I'm going to really stay focused on the technology aspect. I was working for a software company that was tied into the asset-backed securities market, which was the bond market. And of course, this was during the bubble, 2007 and 2008. And, at that point, I sort of realized and said, I knew what was going on in the market. I knew how tough the sledding was going to be in the coming years. And I was able to say, look, I think at this point in my career, I want to transition. I want to leave. I want to try to do a little bit less on the finance side of things and a little bit more on the technology side, and really sort of round out my experience and my education, and get to know, these other areas of infrastructure and cloud and all these new forms of technology that were coming out at the time.
Hmm.
So
And were you successful right out of the gate?
no, no,
Tell me about
it
that.
was, you know what I mean? It was definitely, it was certainly difficult at times, trying to build a business unit, or a book of business from the ground up, is extremely difficult,
Right.
right? There's not a lot of people there trying to, there's no one there selling it for you. Let's put it that way. So,
Did you have some good
and
mentors?
I was super lucky to have some great mentors along the way. Dan Pascantilli being one of them. He was one of the original founders of Bluefront. He was, a tremendous asset for me in my career in terms of, helping me understand the agency model and the indirect sales model and how we bring tremendous amount of value as consultants and really, trusted advisors for folks in our space. So
Hmm.
he, for me, is a big one. Then some other personal ones along the way, and some other close family folks that have, sort of guided me in my journey across life. But yeah,
Right.
yeah, for sure. I think everybody has to have those folks. I mean, it goes back to some of the coaches you had in high school.
Absolutely. For sure. What were maybe not several, but what was the most painful lesson that you had to learn as you were cutting your teeth in sales?
Never think that you're irreplaceable. I think is probably the biggest lesson I learned. It was the hardest lesson I learned. I was actually working for that same software company. It was during the bubble. I had been those guys. I was really more on the consulting side in those days, and the head of sales was after me to sell. You have the temperament, you have the mentality. You can do this. You know the products. People like you. You have the personality. And I was always like, yeah, I'm fine on the consulting side. I'm good doing this. I could do this forever. I don't know that I want to do that. You guys are always selling things, and then I got to figure out how to implement it. You never really know what you're talking about. And I don't know if I really want to do this stuff. I'm not really sure. And then the bubble hit, and boom, the company downsized massively. And I was faced with the decision of really riding this thing out, or kind of jumping out and trying
Right.
to find a different place to go. And that was where I landed with a telecommunications and a cloud company, and sort of the rest is history. And that's how I rounded out the rest of my knowledge on infrastructure and IT, and really, program management and consulting, because I had already had that experience on the software side. And so this was really a nice transition for me, and really sort of launched me into where I am today.
Let's go quickly back to your finance background. One of my beefs with enterprise salespeople is often that they've got no sense of business accounting. They kind of come up with
Mhm.
these really silly ROI calculations, and they talk about stuff that they've got no idea about. Have you found that
Sure.
your finance background actually makes you more effective in enterprise sales?
Uh, I do. I think because where I think it makes it effective is, especially in my space, yes, we're most of the times trying to go up the technology tree inside of an organization, CIO down, right?
Hmm.
CTO down. But another large component of what we do is, optimization, right? And a lot of times what comes out of an optimization is cost savings or cost cutting, or, vendor consolidation. And that drags finance in. And a lot of
Right.
times in technology too, finance and technology are typically attached at the hip in many ways. Dotted line, you see it in a lot of different ways.
Hmm.
So for me, it's helpful because a lot of times I'll have to talk to a CFO, and I'll have to explain to him why this make good sense from an ROI perspective, a total cost of ownership perspective, because
Right.
those are the things that he wants to know. He doesn't, he knows that the CIO is telling him they need this, but he also knows what the dollars and cents are. So for
And
me, I find it tremendously valuable to be able to talk both sides of that conversation with, whatever C is standing in front of me at the time.
for your reps who don't have that finance background, how do you coach them on how to have those conversations themselves, even though they don't have that educational background?
I think honestly, if you're prepared and you build the models, and that's where we're there to help you. If you have the details and the information to back up what it is you're trying to say, and you really are prepared, and you do your homework, and you understand all the elements and all the pieces of the deal, it should be a simple conversation. That's what I really tell them, because if you know all of the landmines, and you know all of your numbers, and you have all of that, and it's in an organized fashion, and it's there, and you can reference it, well, it doesn't really matter if it's the CFO or if it's the IT manager across the table from me,
It
right?
sounds like
I trust what I have because I've done
right.
my homework, and I know it's accurate, and I've asked all of the questions, and I have all the research done, and I know where I need to be.
Yeah,
So,
I love hearing that. We're going to talk a lot more about accountability and about pipeline reviews and all that kind of stuff. I was talking
yes,
yesterday with a company that basically runs its they have a CRM, they have Salesforce, but they basically run their opportunities, their sales pipeline out of Outlook, and nobody knows what's going on. It's all split up in emails and everyone's PST files, and nobody's got a clue where deals stand. It's just so wonderful to hear that clarity about accountability.
Yeah, I mean, there's not. I don't know how you have scalability without that level of accountability. I mean, it's managing a sales funnel or a sales pipeline via Outlook is just not a viable option any longer.
Right.
Did
Yeah,
we
and it's
do
no
it at
wonder
some
that
point in our
forecasts are so
careers? Yeah, sure. Prior to the days of Salesforce.com and all the wonderful tools, sure. But
right.
there's really no there's no excuse not to.
Right. Right. Yeah, I agree. So you've
Yeah.
done direct sales and you've done channel sales. Is
hmm
one easier or better than the other?
Ooh, great question. Great question. Direct sales is I owning the end customer relationship, I believe, is the most difficult thing you can do.
Really?
Um, I do. I do. I believe that the hardest acquisition to make. I really do. Indirect sales is, I think, much more, I feel, relationship focused and really more about how you can articulate, your product set and really build relationships with folks that have the right tentacles in the right areas that you need them to get into
Mm-hmm.
versus, me trying to talk on the other end of the table to a CIO who's got 1,000 different challenges and I'm inside of one given deal and one given opportunity. It's much harder to really bring that from the 50-yard line to the 10-yard line than it is. I'll get more at bats. I get more volume on the indirect channel side, right? So again, I'm not diminishing it because I've done both, and I've built both. I really
Right.
have. That's what I did prior, was build an indirect sales channel before going on building, direct relationships. So they're
All
both
right. So
equally as challenging.
we've got hockey analogies now. We've got football analogies with the 50-yard line. We've got at bats with baseball analogies. We got to cover the whole spectrum of sports here.
There might be a few more.
So
We'll get golf in there at some point.
there you go. You obviously started out, you built yourself in sales, and then at some point you became a sales manager. And I'll just kind of interject. My personal opinion is that a sales manager is the single most important role for a company's success. I think it's absolutely a critical role, but that's a tough transition for many to make, especially a top rep who management assumes will therefore be a top sales manager. And that's often not the case. And they end up taking their great production off the street, filling a role with somebody who can't do the job. And then they've really compounded the problem for themselves. What coaching did you get that really helped you make that transition from sales rep to sales manager?
The biggest thing is that if you feel like you have a process that works and you feel like you can accurately articulate that process, and it's repeatable and you trust it and it's given you proven success, then I think that belief is what makes it easier to make the transition, because then you can say, look, I trust, Susie to manage this account because I've given her all the tools she needs to be successful inside of managing that account and empowering them. And if I mean, at some point, if you want to transition and make and go down different avenues in your career and in your life, you have to say, look, I really want to do that or I don't. And some folks want to and some folks don't. But if you're going to do it, I really think you have to have belief in the fact that you can trust in others. Number one, I think is certainly the biggest thing, but also know that you can guide them on the journey, and you feel like you have a process that was successful for you that you can accurately articulate to other folks and feel like they're going to be successful if they do it too.
That sounds like a really simple thing, but I think what you're describing is critically important.
Yeah.
Have a process that you've refined, that you've practiced, that you've documented, and that you can train others on. Because so often I see somebody, they've had success, but they're not quite sure why. They just do some things naturally to help them, and they can't coach others on how to do that.
Sure. How many times have you seen it in star athletes who are star athletes but can't coach?
Right.
It happens more often than not, right? More
Exactly. Right.
often your coaches are folks that are with the mediocre players or the guys that never played at a professional level, right?
Right.
It happens a lot. It's not often that way. So
So aside from for a rep who's thinking about making that jump, aside
mhm.
from being very honest with themselves about their process, their comfort with it, their ability to coach, what other questions would you advise that they ask themselves to make sure they really are in a position to step into that kind of a role?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say be prepared to be in the constant teaching mode and constant recruiting mode because it's just the sort of the rules and the way that the position shakes out that there's going to be turnover, there's going to be folks moving around, and you have to be prepared for it. And you have to try to have a funnel of folks that, and maintaining relationships and maintaining, avenues of communication with folks that are outside of your organization at that point. Because, again, as a manager, you're only as successful as your team. So if the team's not successful, it becomes a heck of a lot harder for you to be successful. Again, these are basic things that I'm not reinventing the wheel here in any way, but
But they're really
so
important
that's
for people to hear.
yeah, and I think maintaining a network of, maintaining lines of communication with folks across, your years of being in industry is a smart thing to do if you're a manager, because you never know when you may have to tap somebody on the shoulder, or somebody may come to you and say, "Look, I'm leaving this firm. Do you have something for me? Right? Is there something that you can do?" And well, maybe I don't right now, but listen, I'm going to put that guy in my Rolodex and I'm going to keep him there, and I'm going to make sure that I can stay in touch with them and communicate with them.
So
So
you're dating
I think
yourself when
those
you say
are,
Rolodex.
yeah, I know, yeah, it's definitely, yeah,
How
for
about
sure.
losing friends? I mean, I think a new sales manager has to prepare for the fact that suddenly relationships change. That can be painful.
Always. Yeah, always. Always. And I always feel like the biggest thing is communication and honesty.
Right.
If you communicate with folks and you're honest with them, you could put your head on the pillow every night knowing that you were straightforward with folks. And really, I believe that, if there are team members or folks that you're trying to, potentially, maybe it's not a right fit, right? Maybe it's time for for both sides to move on for whatever reason, that,
Hmm.
it's done respectfully and it's done in a manner where, you're not blindsiding people.
Right.
I don't believe in that, especially folks that you've built relationships with over time. Those relationships
All
can sour and they can change, but again, back to what I said earlier, they're still human beings, and you still want to give them, as easy an off ramp as you can.
sure. Lots of talk about coaching, and that kind of brings us back. And there's been a number of sports references throughout the conversation thus far, but let's come back to a key point: the particular attributes of collegiate athletes, or let's call it high performing athletes, that you think can help them excel at sales, drawing from your own experience and what you've seen in others. How would you describe that?
Uh, just dedication to their craft, and really not taking, having an unwillingness to be outworked. Right. I think that's the biggest thing with high level folks and high level athletes is that they're constantly challenging themselves, and they're constantly pushing themselves to be better. And
Hmm.
the motivation varies. And honestly, it's irrelevant. It's that innate drive, I
Right.
think, that's unique to high level athletes, professional athletes, high level NCAA athletes. That's what separates them. There really
Hmm.
is, and their ability to hone that and utilize that, and really to their advantage. And again, it's whether it's a sport or post that sport, I think that ability to just never take no for an answer translates pretty darn well into what we do.
Yeah, like the Patriots 28-3 in the Super Bowl at halftime. We're not giving up.
Sure.
It's about discipline, determination, competitive spirit, and of course teamwork as well.
Absolutely. I mean, again, being part of, Obviously as individual contributors, you obviously have your individual business units and your individual goals and quotas and things like that that you have to hit. So, there's a tremendous amount of pressure placed on you for those things. But there's also, company incentives, teams incentives. And if you're, an equity holder in a firm, then you really, you really want the company to be successful. And you're really thinking also more at a macro level and not
Right.
necessarily at, just your individual, I'm in my individual silo, I'm an individual contributor. So, and again, great, analogy between sports, right? If you're playing a team sport, yeah, everybody loves to lead the team in goals, but if we're winning championships and we're leading the team in goals, it's a much nicer feeling for everybody around you. And we're all really, I think we're all a little bit happier at that point too.
Yeah, for
So,
sure. So when you recruit and you hire, do you specifically look for athletes?
uh, I, I think I'd be lying if I said that when I understand that they are former collegiate athletes, that it doesn't give me, a sense of, well, I think this person understands a few basic concepts about teamwork and about individual hard work, because typically it does. So
Right.
yeah, I like to see that when it comes across on a resume, or I find that out, because again, those folks, at least from what we've seen, typically tend to be the ones that will be a little bit more successful in the long term in those types of roles. So yeah, I mean, we certainly look at it. I mean, I'm not looking out there going, I'm circling every NCAA athlete and they're going to be a great salesperson, right? Because that's
Right.
certainly not the case. But
Right.
there are so many transferable skills.
I recently chatted with a guy named Sean Hurd, who was a former Special Forces soldier, 22 years
Mhm.
in the Ranger Regiment Special Forces group. Multiple combat deployments, scuba instructor, just a very impressive set of credentials as a soldier. He works for a firm that trains and places both military veterans and collegiate athletes into sales jobs. And they found a
Mhm.
lot of similarities between those two in terms of, that
Yep.
discipline, that determination, that grit. You talked about every morning you're trying to get a workout in. I'm sure
Mhm.
you're tired, you're up late the night before, there's crap you got to get to, and still
Mhm.
that's just the way you do it. It's kind of like prospecting. Nobody wants to hit the
Yeah.
weight room after practice, and
Yeah.
still people do it. Those that want to be better, be stronger, be more effective, prevent injury, improve their performance, they've got to lift, and
Mhm.
salespeople have to prospect. Is that a fair analogy?
It's an absolute fair analogy. The phone is not dead. Prospecting is not
Amen.
dead.
I'm, thank heavens you're
These
saying that.
these are all not true things, true statements.
All
And
right, but I got to interrupt you because I know the one thing
yeah,
that a lot of people listening are going to say is, yeah, but our industry is different. So talk
mm,
a little bit about what industries are you selling to? What job titles are you selling to?
yeah. I mean, we're going after typically technology folks, right? So we're going after the chief information technologies, chief technology officers, and everybody sort of down that stack. And then when we get into the cost optimization side of the house and the cost saving side of the house, we're talking to CFOs, right?
And
So
what
those are
kinds of
really the
companies, though?
mid to enterprise level companies, right? So companies that
What
are,
industries?
I'd say, oh, we're really vertical agnostic in a lot, but I mean, me personally, I've done a decent amount in manufacturing and industrial services, just through some of the customers that I've had some success with throughout the years. So,
And I know I've got a lot of clients that sell into the food industry. So there are
mhm.
manufacturers that sell into food manufacturers. We
Yep,
chatted at one point, and you shared that in fact you guys sell a lot into the food industry, and I thought that kind of
yep,
perked my radar up a little bit because you're selling to the same
yeah.
kinds of companies.
Yeah, for sure, we are. And we've done a decent amount in that, like I said, in the manufacturing and the food space, also in the logistics space, which I think there's a lot of similarities that cross between those two vertical markets.
Right.
And you know, there there's there's a definitely a unique set of challenges on the manufacturing side when it comes from a technology perspective. There's typically a resistance. There's typically a sense of, well, if it's not broke, don't fix it, don't modernize, don't fill gaps. And
Right.
honestly, in today's world, with all the bad actors and all the negative things that are going on, and you don't have to look very far in the press to see them and to see how badly they're hurting organizations. It's just putting your head in the sand, and that's the biggest thing that I think we find is at least that I come across is a lot of customers just think it won't happen to me, and I'll roll the dice and we'll take the chances, and that's not really a way to run a business
Yeah, hope
in
is
the
not
end.
strategy, as they say.
It's
So
not.
just to,
It's
so we're
not.
going to reiterate for the record that selling to
Yep.
manufacturing companies, selling to food manufacturers, selling into industrials and into logistics companies, the phone works, prospecting works, and they're both
It does.
critical to do.
Absolutely, and it's critical to make sure that you're honest with yourself in terms of carving out time to do the prospecting, right?
Right,
I mean,
for sure.
it's one thing to say you're going to do it. It's another they're going to do it. It's another thing to actually put some time and energy into it and to block off your calendar and to do it at certain times. I was literally having this conversation with a gentleman that I work with a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about prospecting on a Friday, and my ears perked up. I wasn't even part of this conversation because in my earlier days, I loved prospecting on Fridays.
Friday
It was
afternoon, people are sitting at their
pe-
desk.
people are at their desk. They were typically in a good mood because it was a Friday. They were more apt to pick up. They were more apt
Right.
to have a conversation and be a little bit more forthcoming with information. And some people would look at me cross-eyed. Like, what do you mean? It's Friday. You're picking up the phone, and yeah. But so I guess that to that end is you have to do it, and you have to
Of
be
course.
disciplined about doing it. And as long as you are, I think you'll get results. There'll be days where you feel like you're not getting results, but it also just can't be. It's a combined effort too, right? You have to leverage your LinkedIn network. You have to leverage your professional networks. There's a lot of prongs to it, but
And you have to have a sales manager who coaches you on technique. Technique matters. I mean,
yeah,
you have to do it
it
the right
does.
way. All of that fits
Mhm.
together. Let's talk about this kumbaya world in which we live, where the idea of competitiveness is strangely offensive to many people. I don't consider competitive a dirty word. I assume that you don't either. Talk about
Yeah.
competitiveness and what it does in sales.
Yeah, I don't think it's a dirty word at all. Um, as a matter of fact, I think a certain level of competitiveness across a sales team or a sales organization is a good thing. Um, I think it drives people to be better and to perform at a higher level. I think it makes them, for those folks who were former high school athletes or college athletes, it allows them to tap into that competitive nature, right? That maybe they don't often get to tap into all that much because they're not playing those sports anymore. And maybe they get out and play. Now I'll get another sport in and golf, maybe here or there on the weekends. And, maybe there's only a little bit of that going on and they're not getting that. Well, that's a great source and a way to tap into that with a team and to create camaraderie, fun, and I think also just good, healthy competition, which I think good salespeople crave.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. So do you still skate?
I do. So what I do is with my son when I can. I've unfortunately had some surgeries and some work done that doesn't allow me to get out there too much anymore. But I miss it every day. I wish I could still be flying around out there. I was actually lucky enough to get out with my sons and a bunch of my nephews on Christmas Eve and just skate around. And there were
Oh,
about
nice.
8 or 10 of us, and it was some of the most fun I've had in a long time. So,
Oh,
um,
fabulous. So,
yeah,
so if it's not hockey, then do you have hobbies, or how do you exercise? And aside from your sales number, how do you exercise your competitiveness?
yeah. I mean, I try to play golf. It's not as it doesn't always work out so well, um, and I don't always get to do it as much, given the time commitments and families and work and things along those lines. But that's how I try to do it, and then just try to get out and do is try to walk, try to get out and do as much exercise as you can,
Got it.
when I can do it, when I can do it. But yeah.
Let's shift gears to kind of some sales talk, if you will, shop talk.
Mhm.
How about
Yeah.
sales methodologies? Spin, Sandler, strategic selling, baseline selling. Are there any that you found particularly effective that you prefer to use and train your team on?
Um, I, I mean, I think they all, here's what I'll say about all of them. I think they all have pieces and components that I think are valuable and have tremendous amounts of merit.
Hmm.
I do think that it's not a one size fits all. And I think some work for some folks, some work for others, some are able to adopt certain pieces of one methodology and marry that with a piece of another methodology, and that's what works for them. I mean, we're all different people. To think that Sandler's going to work for everybody, I think is not feasible,
Right.
right? So I think it's more about continuing that education and constantly presenting them with different ways to think and different ways to approach things to get them maybe outside their comfort zone and outside their box, so to speak,
Hmm.
is probably a better way to use those tools than to just say, look, here's Sandler. We're going to take Sandler and then we're going to follow it religiously, and you know, we're going to be
But
successful.
what you're describing, helping your people get outside the comfort zone, that takes a
Yeah.
lot of coaching and mentoring and role playing. A lot of people hate role playing because we all feel dorky doing it, but it's hugely valuable. It's like running drills, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, role playing and understanding situations is certainly a valuable part of being prepared for any situation. I definitely think that's true.
So competitiveness, some people consider a dirty word. We both agree that it's often a good thing. Another, sometimes a word that sometimes people consider a dirty word is sales commissions. Too
Hmm.
often, I see finance and operations folks who get involved in weighing in on comp plans and structuring comp plans, and they kind of, I'd say they resent the money that sales makes. And so they start playing games with that and cutting and changing the rules. How would you describe the role of compensation in driving sales results?
Yeah, I mean, I think it first of all, compensation will 100% drives behavior. I think is the overarching point, and I don't know that many people would disagree with that statement. Um, and I think that there has to be a happy balance, really, between what what you have in terms of earning potential and what the company feels like is enough in terms of compensation, right? I do believe that there's a happy balance there, but I also believe that you what you don't want to do is a stunt a players, stunt the growth of folks by capping commissions and saying, look, you can't make a lot, or making goals unattainable, because that can ruin the dynamic of a team, the dynamic of a
Sure.
group. It really can tear down a structure if you've spent time building it. If people feel like they can't support their families, or they can't have a certain earning power there because you've made it unattainable. Well, that has a way of degrading the situation pretty quickly. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Cap commissions, just I shake my head. I don't understand the point. And in the space where I am, a lot of these machinery companies, for instance, will
Yeah,
often reduce the commission as the size of the deal increases. So maybe it's 20% on a $1 million deal, 20% of margin on a
yeah.
$1 million deal, but only 15% on a $5 million deal.
Right, that's I mean, it's short sighted if you know your business and you know that once you've acquired a customer, the odds of you growing that customer by X percentage and keeping that customer for a certain amount of time, you're what that sales individual is asking for is not a lot
Right.
in terms of what the company's going to realize in terms of revenue off of that specific deal.
And
So
and are you a fan of accelerators? Monthly,
I
quarterly,
am.
semi-annual accelerators?
I'm a big fan of accelerators, again, because it drives that competitive nature, and it drives folks to number one, hit areas that you really want to focus on, and it drives them to think differently about maybe products or product sets or relationships. Right. Well, I haven't thought about this product for that person because
Right.
before I didn't really think about it in this way. Right.
Right.
So all those things are hugely positive, I think, in terms of motivation and getting folks, you know, getting getting folks excited.
Hmm.
about
And
what they're
keeping
doing.
them excited.
Yeah, and keeping them excited. Yeah.
When we first met, somehow we got on the subject of sales and sales management, and it was an interesting conversation. I started throwing more and more pointed questions at you, asking about very specific metrics and what you track and methodologies, and you never skipped a beat. You knew your numbers, and I love that because it's not often that I talk to somebody that really knows their numbers. What would you say are the most important metrics for a sales manager to track?
Activity. Yeah,
Okay.
activity is a huge component, I think, because the more active you are, the more conversations you are, the more events you're at, the more people you're talking to, the more you're working your network, the more likely there's going to be things that are going to fall out of that tree that are going to lead to, you know, to potential opportunities and then potential business. So activity is a huge metric, and quality
But
activity too, right?
yeah, I was going to say
Not
you're talking
just,
activity, not just a certain number of dials,
yeah,
but you're talking number of conversations.
no,
And right,
quality conversations, quality opportunities, being honest with yourself about what you're putting in the CRM and how relevant it is that that's actually going to result into revenue if you do certain things to get it to
right,
that. And
right.
that's the other piece, is just be honest with yourself about what's there. A lot of times I think we kid ourselves and we say, yeah, that guy's going to do this, or I'm going to really get that. Well, don't, right? Be honest. That only gets you in trouble in the long run. And that's a two-way street.
So accountability to yourself, honesty with yourself, but also you're talking about
Yeah.
accountability in using the CRM, putting solid data in there, using it to track what's going on, knowing your numbers, knowing your activity. How do you maintain that accountability? Because so many salespeople want to push back against CRM. They think it's Big Brother.
Absolutely. I think I was the same person thinking it was Big Brother and fighting against it and running my business out of, oh, look, trust me, I was there. I was that person. And then now with having matured, I think, or I hope, and knowing how valuable it is to be able to run a quick report and say, look, these are the amount of opportunities that were open last year. This is the amount of revenue in a funnel. This is what I'm looking at. This is what I'm projecting for Q3 and Q4 or whatever that might be. You're going to be asked for those numbers by somebody somewhere, and because it's a numbers driven game. So if
Hmm.
you're not cognizant of that and you're not ready for it and don't have the tools in place to be able to serve that up, I just don't think you can really survive today. Again, yeah, pre-Salesforce and all these other systems, yeah, sure, but not today. Not today. It's too valuable. It's too
Right.
valuable to private equity firms, to senior management, to C-suite folks, because that's where all the value is in terms of how are we performing.
Right. How long should a rep be allowed to muddle along if they're not hitting their number?
That's a loaded question right there. That's a super loaded question. Um, Man, I'm going to have to take the high road on that one and say it varies, because it does.
Sure,
It
of
really
course.
does. It varies on the person. It varies on the personality. I mean, there'll be times where you'll say, nope, I made a mistake and it's time to move on. And there'll be other times you'll say, look, just give him, just need a little bit more. He's almost there. He's about to turn the corner. So it's really hard to say. There's no magic answer there. It's really case by case. And it's how it's looking at the numbers and looking at the activity and taking all those
Right.
things into consideration, and then looking at the person too, right? It's not all, you know again, we'll go to another sports reference, right? It's not always the analytics. It's also the feel of the manager and the feel of the person, and what your gut might tell you about them or might not tell you about them.
Right. And what's your experience? Is it best to put them on a PIP, or is it best when you've reached that point to just move them out?
No, I would pip all the way. I want to give him the opportunity and give him every chance to be successful and to be, to turn the ship around and to let him know, that there's a future here if you can, do the things that we need you to do.
And have you seen
So
people
no,
make it off a PIP?
it's rare. It's
Yeah.
rare. It's rare.
I heard a
Yeah.
great expression
Yeah.
from a guy, Frank Slootman, I think is his name. He's the CEO of
Yeah.
Snowflake. And he
Yeah.
said, we're very patient with performance, but we're impatient with behavior. So in other words, if you're doing the work, if you're working with your
Yeah.
coach, if you're taking the lessons, if you're striving to improve, if you're doing the activity, we'll support you. But if you're just
Sure.
doing what you want and you're not performing, then we're not going to waste our time. You agree with that?
That I agree with wholeheartedly. I mean, that's there's no sense in keeping somebody around who isn't putting in the effort to be successful. No. And
Right.
if you're confident in that and you see that, which, a good manager or a good, director will know those things when they see them, then yeah, you need to cut bait and run. There's no
And
reason
can
to
you know
waste any
that
more
even
time and energy.
can
I'm
you can
sorry?
you know that even before you've worked your way through the entire sales cycle?
Even though having not seen them, get from A to Z in a sale, can you make that
No. So
determination? Is that what you're
if
saying?
you've got a 12-month sales cycle, do you have
Yeah.
to let them go the full 12 months plus a little bit, or can you know 3 months into it that it's just not going to work?
I think again, that's a case by case. I think there are times where you'll know 3 months in, and there are times where you won't.
Okay,
Yeah,
fair
I
enough.
really do, and it's a person by person, and a deal by deal specific, right? Every deal is different. The dynamics
Right.
of every deal are different. The personalities are different, right? And that's yeah, you won't know. I mean, to be honest, but the overarching theme of if you know somebody's not a good fit and they're not putting in the effort and it's obvious, there's no sense in keeping that around. That has way more negative impact on a team and on a group than it does any positive.
And on
So
that person in many cases too.
absolutely, you're doing them a tremendous disservice and reinforcing the wrong behavior. So I would
Right.
agree. Yeah,
What does
yeah.
your pipeline review typically sound like?
What does it sound like in terms of what?
Whatever you're willing to tell me about it. So often, let me give you some more context. Too often, I hear a
Yeah,
pipeline review that sounds something
yeah,
like, "Okay, you say this deal is going to close next quarter. What do you need from me to
yeah,
get it done?" I mean, that doesn't do anybody any good. That doesn't really
yeah,
figure out where the deal stands. So, how do you dig into the details? How do you really vet it and help the rep understand what they might be missing and figure out what the company could
yeah,
be doing differently to push it across the line?
yeah. I always really felt the way to do that was to have, what you're talking about. That I felt like was the team meeting, right? Get on,
Okay.
everybody gets on. We talk about our deals of certain size and scope. Where are they? When are they coming in? What are our projections? We talk about that. But if I want to get into the dynamics of a deal and the nuts and bolts and the strategy, that's a one-on-one with a rep. That's where we need to say, okay, look, you're projecting this. These are the deals that are at this stage of let's say again, another sports analogy, that are closer to the 10-yard line, right? They're about to close. What do you need? Well, let's unpack them, right? This is at the 10-yard line. Tell me about it. Where are we? What's the decision that we're waiting on? Do we have contracts in front of them? Are they in legal review? Have they seen the MSA? Right now we're kind of really adding as a manager or as somebody who's not the rep in the deal, trying to add value to that person and really help them, get it across. That to me is more of a poignant one-on-one funnel review than, yeah, that's great. I got 5 deals. I'm going to close 2. Maybe I
Right.
get them. Maybe I don't. I'm waiting on legal, whatever. All those sales calls that we've all been on 1,000 times. And again, I don't want to knock them. There are there's merit to them. You share knowledge. People hear little nuggets about certain deals, and it makes them think about another deal a certain way. So I don't want to make it sound like it's not important because it is. But the if you want to really get inside of a funnel and inside of the dynamics of a deal, that's got to be really on a one-on-one basis with that rep.
Yeah, I completely agree. And too often it is just that group call. But you mentioned this, maybe we get them, maybe we
Yeah.
don't. One of the things that certainly I see a lot more of is deals that end in no decision. Most of the companies I'm
Yeah.
working with, maybe they win 30%, they lose 30%. That means 40% just evaporate. How do you coach your team to avoid that?
I mean, listen, that's the worst answer in business is maybe, right? The worst. It's the absolute worst. Nobody wants it. And the way, the more questions you ask, the more information you get up front about that specific customer, the way they respond, how they respond, what they're willing to offer you in terms of information, what they're not. The worst thing in the world I feel like you can do is get on the phone with a customer or prospect and tell them all about you. It's the last
Amen.
thing you should do.
For
Get on the
sure.
phone, give them 15 seconds about you and what you're hearing. It's not about me. Tell me about you, because that's the only way I will figure out if there's really an opportunity for us to do business here or not.
Right.
So the faster I get to that information, the better.
That obviously takes a lot of coaching to help your team get proficient at that and stay proficient. I mean, there are people that develop a level of proficiency, but markets change and they don't. So you have to continuously be improving. How much time out of your week, what percentage of your time do you actually spend coaching one-on-one?
I'd probably say it was about 5 to 10 hours a week.
Okay.
I'd say coaching one-on-one, and that was a team of about 6 people, I think. Yeah. Yeah. About that. Yeah. And I
And
would say
on
roughly it
what,
was about that. I tried to meet with all of them every week for a minimum of an hour. And usually that bled into a few more because we'd get into the dynamics of the deal and it would take longer, and all positive conversations. But yeah, I would say it varied.
and what
But that
topic were
was,
you coaching on most often?
getting to the people that can actually move the process forward, right? A lot of
Hmm.
times you find people get stuck in the mud dealing with folks that, you know, were well intentioned but not really ones that could actually get things across the finish line. So
Right.
really making sure that you're at the right level with the right folks that can actually make this happen, I think, is the biggest level of coaching.
I love that answer. One of the things that I notice most often, I use a set of diagnostic tools often to help kind of do an MRI on a sales team and understand strengths and weaknesses, process, personalities, individual capability in terms of specific sales competencies and that sort of thing. One of the things that we look at is where sales managers, how much time they spend coaching, what interval or frequency they do it at, and what topics they
Mm-hmm.
talk about. And what I see most often is they talk about technical features and pricing. And that's, in my view, not sales
Mm-hmm.
management. I mean, that's kind of, technical support or something like that. Sales management is
Yeah.
account management, target account management, territory management, sales tactics, sales strategy, role
Mm-hmm.
playing, technique, all that kind of stuff. And particularly those important
Yeah.
things like getting to decision makers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my whole goal was always to try. I always felt like as a sales manager, or it was my job to give them all the tools that they needed to be successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was my job to manage internal expectations, get them internal resources that they needed, made sure that they had the support and the air cover they needed to really bring those deals and those opportunities home. And really, that's the job, I think, I mean, it gets overlooked and I think doesn't happen a lot, but that's really the job of a sales manager, is to be that advocate and to be that buffer and that blocker and that person that really helps those folks be successful and arm them with whatever it is they need to be successful.
And I love the military analogy there, the air cover. But obviously, the job of the VP of sales is then to coach and help the sales managers to execute that job, not to just say, "Hey, get me a roll up of the pipeline of the forecast."
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. For sure. And it's that same blueprint and that same footprint and that same process, and believing in it and trusting in it, and making sure that you can articulate it to folks, and then again, not also being so rigid that you say, look, this is my box, get in my box. This is the only way to do it, right? Because that's not the way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's to say, look, there's a framework and you need to find what works the best for you, but do it in this framework because we know this has been successful in other ways,
Right, makes
right?
sense.
Because you don't want to
Well,
fall. What you don't want to do is stunt somebody's ability that's got a unique way of doing something and saying, well, don't do it that way. Well,
right,
why not? It's successful, so do it that
right,
way, right?
right.
And maybe we'll all learn something along the way by this person doing it in a different way.
Sure, absolutely. What would you say that marketing really fails to understand about sales, and what would help them do a better job supporting sales?
Um, I think what marketing fails to understand about sales is how I really think it's how important that the follow-up and the day two and the constant staying in front of certain key folks inside of your strategic customer base, how important that really is, and doing it in the right manner, right? And when I say that, I think it's really about trusting the folks that manage those relationships and tailoring how you spend those marketing dollars to support those customers in that way. Now, how marketing does logos and redesigns and marketing campaigns, Ed, that is not me. I stay long out of that space. It's not what I do. From a sales perspective, what I want is, I mean, ideally leads, right? That's
Hmm.
what we would love from a marketing organization is good qualified leads. And if you can't get good qualified leads, put me in positions where I can get them myself, right?
Hmm.
Put me in front of organizations where we could put a talented sales staff or a talented individual in front of them. And there's good, solid decision makers there that actually are in the market looking for tools, looking for solutions, looking for folks that can help them. Great.
What
Put
kind of
me in those
sales enable
situations,
For
you
sure?
know.
What kind of sales
Yeah.
enablement tools would you say, based on watching enterprise sales today, what is
Yeah.
most effective? What helps your team the most?
Honestly, what I think, and I don't think anybody in the industry or just in general does enough of this. But what I feel like has the most value is when you can get to a point where you're having not larger, you know, huge engagements or conferences or shows, where you're having more enclave like individualized, tailored, and focused conversations and dinners and events that have, that are drawing people by a topic, by a celebrity, by something, by some reasons to pull them in, and being really tailored and driven towards that. I think those are the ones that have the better ROI to me
Right.
personally than, throwing a massive event and having people shuttle through, and it's like speed dating, right? Again, nothing against those events, not that they don't have their place, not that we don't all go to them and pull leads out of them, because we do. I just feel like when it's more tailored and you have a more captivated audience, I think the results tend to be a little better because people tend to open up a little bit more. They tend to feel like it's more of um an intimate situation. And I think I think the I think the ROI on those is better.
There's no doubt. I think that the most difficult part of sales right now is getting that first meeting, having a conversation, a meaningful conversation where somebody gives
Mhm.
you attention for 15 minutes. And it
Sure.
sounds like that environment you're describing is probably particularly conducive to achieving that.
Yeah, if it's, again, if they're, if the folks in the room are qualified, they know why they're there, they know that they know that there are other folks in the room that are of like mind and that are
Hmm.
there for the same reasons and to just talk about the same things. It removes a lot of those barriers. So, right. So, this is really to close the circle on your marketing question, right? If I'm going to take some MDF dollars and I'm going to spend it on something, to me, that's a good use of those funds than, maybe throwing hey, let's have a happy hour at such and such a bar and swing by if you can.
Right. Right.
That's
Yeah. So
really, I'm trying to,
you get people in the
so
mindset of acknowledging and wrestling with a business problem as opposed to just getting together for a cocktail.
yeah, yeah, I mean, and I mean, wrap a topic around it. AI,
Hmm.
right? I
Right.
mean,
Right.
who wouldn't right now if you put together a seminar that said we're going to be focused on AI right now. We're going to have these keynote speakers, and we're
Right.
going to have this, this person here, this celebrity here to say hello, and it's going to be at this really nice restaurant or whatever that might be. Yeah,
Hmm.
does that cost some marketing dollars? Sure. But do I feel like you get a higher return off on that? I do.
Right.
Again, but that's my personal belief in terms of where I think we could spend more of our marketing efforts and less on maybe some of the larger scale things.
Yeah, I completely understand. What's your biggest worry or concern about the profession of sales today?
That my biggest worry and concern is the that there's a lack or not a lack of, is that think how to say this, that there's too much of hiding behind screens and Zooms and Microsoft Teams, and we're losing a lot of those interpersonal skills that are so valuable to sales and so important to really understanding the dynamics of a deal, and more importantly, of who people really are, right? So many times in my career, I'd find out everything I needed in the meeting after the meeting.
Hmm.
It wasn't in the meeting. And really, that's what I feel like maybe we're losing a little bit more of, is that personal touch, that, hey, let's sit across the table from each other and have a conversation, right?
It also sounds though, I think I hear an echo of your athletics and what it's like to have a teammate and looking somebody in the eye and knowing if you can count on them.
Yeah,
That's that way that we
for
take a
sure.
measure of somebody else by being belly button to belly button.
Yeah, for sure. There's no, to me, and I'm sure it's a very old school way of approaching it and of thinking about it, but there's no better way to, to build a bond or a relationship or trust, which is the
Right.
key, than sitting across,
Right.
from a desk or a table, and and having a cup of coffee with somebody, and
Right.
just talking about life, about who they are, about who the person is, and and that to me is invaluable when it comes to business. And
Hmm.
I think we're not doing enough of that today.
Yeah, I
So
completely agree.
that's my one thing, if I had to circle in sales, that I wish we would do more of, and it would be that.
So we've already talked about, you've mentioned AI. So let's take that off the list. Aside from AI, what would you say is the biggest opportunity that many people are missing about where sales can go over the next 5 years?
In my space specifically, you mean?
Well,
Or
kind of
just in
B2B
general,
enterprise
or?
sales in general.
I mean, listen, AI is the clear leader by far and away. I really, I mean, you want to take it off the table, I'm unfortunately going to have to bring it back on the table, because it
Fair
really is
enough.
the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and it's what will, it'll be analogous to the .com bubble, but it won't take 20 years. It'll take two, and
And
it'll
is it going to
mature, and
obviate
it'll
sales?
happen fast. No, I don't think so, because I still think you can't take, there's a certain level of human interaction you need to drive revenue. And I don't know that you can ever take that out of that equation. So, do I think AI will fundamentally change the way we operate in the world, and the way, some back office tasks and some, certain industries are changed forever? And, there are lots of people that will need to be retrained into other, other areas of the workforce. Sure. I believe that for sure. Um, but I don't believe that in sales. I don't. I truly believe that it's going to be extremely hard to replace that person that's at the tip of the spear driving revenue.
Yeah, makes sense. So obviously you're a student and a lifelong student of sales. Where do you go to learn? What books do you read? What YouTube channels you watch? Blogs, podcasts? Where do you recommend that people go to continue to learn the way you do?
Yeah, I mean, I try to really read as many books as I possibly can that are just related to. I read a lot of military books. So I read a lot about strategy. I read a lot about how these guys approach teams and approach teamwork, and difficult tasks, and how they overcome them, and things along those lines. So it's less for me now, I think, that I'm reading about, the Sandlers of the world, and the different methodologies, and just more things about, how people function in certain environments and certain situations, and how they handled them, right? And how you can take that and utilize that and apply that to a team or to a situation.
Makes sense. So if people want to catch up with you, connect with you, or maybe even reach out because they're frustrated with their IT situation, how do they track you down,
Sure.
Mario?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn, Mario Trafficante, or you can find me at Amplex. My email's mtrafficante@amplex.com. I'm sure when you post this, people will have that information there as well. But yeah, happy to chat with anybody about sales, IT, AI, life in general, sports, all of the above, hockey. So it's been
Perfect.
a real pleasure, Ed. So thanks.
Yeah, but I'm not going to let you off the hook quite yet, though.
All right.
For all of this
Sorry.
conversation, now you
Yeah.
need to kind of take us home. Give us the 30,000-foot definitive word on what it takes to succeed in complex sales today and how sales managers can help and what companies need to provide to the teams to make them successful.
Yeah. I mean, I would say be knowledgeable, right? Be really knowledgeable about what it is that you're putting in front of your customers. Um, be courteous, be thoughtful, be curious about what it is that, the problem that you're trying to solve, and really understand that and understand the value that you bring to the table. And then as a manager, give the tools to the folks that are out there every day carrying that bag. Give them every ounce of support you can, and every tool and every mechanism to make them successful. And really, that's what a sales manager needs to do, and fight those battles internally that that they need you to fight, and get that pricing approved when they need you to get it approved, and do all those things. They really will help to make them successful. And and above it all, just make sure you're accountable. If you're an individual contributor, make sure you're accountable to yourself. And if you're a manager, make sure you're accountable to yourself and to your team.
Accountability. What a powerful way to end this. And so much, I think, of the business opportunity exists for people and companies that can figure out how to restore more accountability to business. Thank you very much, Mario. What a fabulous conversation. Appreciate your insights. Appreciate not only the perspective you bring on athletes as salespeople, but your time in the trenches as a sales manager, your lessons learned along the way, metrics, KPIs, what it's like working in sales for a private equity firm, all that stuff that you've packed in this conversation has been fabulous. For everyone listening, if you enjoyed this, as I hope you did, please make sure that you know the drill. Hit the bell, share this, comment, give it a review, share it with people. We'd love to have more visibility so that when we chat with people like Mario, others can benefit from it. Thanks, Mario, and thanks everybody for listening.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Ed. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.